Dear friends, we have been studying chapter 17 several times, but we still have at least one more study to go. We shall have to come back to this subject anyway, as I do recognize it is a difficult one. So far, we have been able to gather some explanations. We especially saw who the woman was, who the beast was, who the heads were, but we haven't yet seen what the horns represent. It is in verse 12 that the explanation on the horns will be given us. So, I invite you to read the explanation about the horns as revealed in verse 12. Revelation 17, verses 12 to 14. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. These are of one mind. They will give their power and authority to the beast. They will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings, and those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. That's one explanation, but you will agree that it is perhaps difficult to understand. So, to understand these 10 horns, we should probably once again go back to the book of Prophet Daniel, and I invite you to watch what is said in the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 7. After this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. When looking at the succession of empires in this chapter 7, the fourth animal represents the Roman Empire. The first one is Babylon, the second one Medo-Persian Empire, the third the Greek Empire of Alexander the Great and his successors, and then the fourth, the Roman Empire. We are told that it has 10 horns, that is to say 10 kings. But the Roman Empire was a multitude of provinces, but the power was centralized in Rome. To understand this meaning of the text, let us go a little further in verse 24, where it says, "The 10 horns are 10 kings, who shall arise from this kingdom." The fact that these horns rise from this kingdom shows that they were not present at the beginning. And in fact, the Roman Empire would fall under the attacks of the barbarians, and the Western Roman Empire would be divided into 10 countries, which, as you know, still exist today. The Lombards would give Italy, the Frankish and Burgundian would give France, the Swabians would give Portugal, and so on. Therefore, today's Europe is based on the division of the Roman Empire in about 10 nations. These are the 10 horns, and there is no need of any change in the interpretation from the book of Daniel to the book of Revelation. Therefore, let's maintain this idea that the 10 horns represent the 10 nations or so emerging from the dismantling of the Roman Empire, which currently constitute the Western Europe. Now, let's go a little further, and let's try to see what difference there is between the 7 heads, that are the 7 kings, and the 10 horns, that are 10 kings. A fundamental difference between the two. The 7 heads are 7 successive kings, so they give us an idea of spreading out over a time period and a historical information. while the 10 horns rule together. They reign with the beast. They receive authority for 1 hour with the beast altogether. Therefore, they run alongside, and indeed the 10 European countries exist simultaneously. So they rather give us a geographical indication, a scope. Obviously, in their first explanation in Revelation 17, the 7 heads also gave us a geographical idea, in that they represented Rome, the 7 hills of Rome. But you see, things do not have much to do. Therefore, this beast with the 7 heads gives us a period of time, and this period of time lasts from Babylonian Empire to the end of time, and the 10 horns give us a geographical indication that roughly corresponds to the Western Europe and gives us a pretty good idea of what this beast is. Now, let's look at other details. Let's return to verse 12. Revelation 17:12. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet. We must recognize that even the presidents or kings of the constitutional monarchies that still exist in our Western Europe do not have the power of the ancient kings or emperors in the Middle Ages. They have not received power as kings yet. It seems that the text tells us that they will receive. They have not yet been given authority as kings, but they will receive it. By what means? Which system? Could we still expect in Europe authoritarian systems? This sounds difficult. We see in Europe something supranational, thus depriving every leader parts of his authority. Let's see what the text has to say. They have not received any kingdom yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. We must try to understand something here. So far, the beast and the 10 horns were together as a whole. While now, it seems that the beast and the 10 horns are not as close together as they were before. This could mean that maybe the political side would be separated from the religious side, that there would be some distance between the two. And that's the current situation. Again, we hardly imagine a constitution with a political religious system. And yet, the text here is a very strong one. The 10 horns receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. So it is through collaboration with the beast that they will receive their authority. And the text continues even more surprising. Verse 13, Revelation 17:13. These are of one mind that they will give their power and authority to the beast. Here lies the surprise. They receive their authority because they partner with the beast, but they somehow return the favor, which means that the authority they have received from the beast, they give it back to him. This means that at that time, the beast would have an absolute colossal power. And therefore, a European political religious system constitutes itself. It reconstitutes. You may say, it already exists. Yes, but the political side was supposed to be separated from the religious side. They will again cooperate. The beast is full of blasphemies. He is competing with God. and he will fight against Babylon, which is a world global political and religious system. Therefore, there is here something amazing that makes these European nations tend to, allow me the term, get into bed with or enter into corrupt deals with the religious. Let's keep on reading this text. Verse 14. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. Now, I'd like to talk a little about the Lamb which will overcome them, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. We find this royal title in chapter 19 when Jesus returns. And I invite you to read this text with me. Revelation chapter 19, verse 16. And he has on his robe and on his thigh a name written, King of kings and Lord of lords. If we go back to verse 13, he is called the Word of God. Thus, there is no doubt as to the identification of this character. He is accompanied by the armies in heaven on white horses. It is the description of Jesus' return. Therefore, this victory is going to win it over the beast and over the kings, that is, the 10 horns, is a victory he wins at his return. We said somewhere back that the fall of Babylon was close to Jesus' return. Actually, it is going to be crushed down by a system that is made of the beast and the 10 horns. But the 10 horns and the beast himself will be destroyed at the time of Jesus' return. Let's move a little forward and see what happens with this proposition of reigning. Because if Jesus is the King of kings, he is completing this city, which is said to reign over the kings of the earth. Even in chapter 18 and verse 7, it is called queen. Let's read it together. Chapter 18, verse 7. In the measure that she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, in the same measure give her torment and sorrow. For she says in her heart, I sit as queen, and am no widow, and will not see sorrow. Verse 14 tells us that the elect and the faithful who are with the Lamb shall overcome them. They will overcome the kings of the earth and the beast. They already won victory over the beast because they had received no marks on the hand or forehead. And we saw them in chapter 15 worship God before his throne on the glass sea. But they also win victory over the kings of the earth at the time. They are still the 144,000, and they win because they have not yielded to the seduction. Verse 15 will give us another explanation. Then he said to me, the waters which you saw, where the harlot sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Some peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages, and if the woman sitteth upon many waters, it is because it has a broad popular base. But it is the beast itself which comes from the sea that probably gives her this broad popular support. And when they see the beast turn against the woman, it is understandable that popular support will be missing. But the beast is part of the woman, she herself being part of Babylon. Babylon is tripartite, and the beast is one part of it. We then understand that if the beast turns against the woman, there is division within Babylon. Keeping on with the text, we find the following. And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, they will hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. Here something strange happens, something amazing. The first goal of the beast and the 10 horns is to fight against the Lamb and against his followers. But now, all of a sudden, their goal changes, or rather, perhaps they do a ricochet, and their project initially gets to target at Babylon. So why shoot at Babylon? Well, perhaps because there is competition between the beast and Babylon. Babylon was dressed in scarlet and claimed royalty. But the beast was scarlet in essence. It was queen. And therefore, there is a situation which was unbearable. She occupied a second place. She was no longer in the forefront. But basically, it is a queen, and therefore it cannot indefinitely tolerate the kingdom of Babylon. The other thing that is interesting is that perhaps the reputation of Babylon becomes sulfurous, and that in order to fight against God's people, about whom there is not much to complain, she must show herself impeccable. In short, whatever the reasons that are not revealed in the text, the fact is that in order to go fight against the Lamb and his people, his followers, she will start fighting against Babylon. And I would like to read a text from the Old Testament which tells us the same thing. Let's look at the book of Prophet Isaiah, chapter 47, verses 1 to 6. Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne, O daughter of Chaldeans, for you shall no more be called tender and delicate. Take the millstones and grind meal. Remove your veil. Take off the skirt. Uncover the thigh. Pass through the rivers. Your nakedness shall be uncovered. Yes, your shame will be seen. I will take vengeance. I will not arbitrate with a man. And for our Redeemer, the Lord of hosts is his name, the Holy One of Israel. Sit in silence and go into darkness, O daughter of Chaldeans, for you shall no longer be called the Lady of Kingdoms. I was angry with my people. I have profaned my inheritance and given them into your hand. You showed them no mercy. On the elderly you laid your yoke very heavily. This is the reproach made to him. She treated God's people harshly. So, we find ourselves here before a break inside Babylon. And we had already mentioned this text, which we find in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 12, verse 25, saying, Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself will not stand. Well, I would like to read a text that is in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 28, verse 18. Ezekiel 28, 18. This concerns a lamentation upon the king of Tyrus. And the text slides gradually, leading us to understand that it is related to Satan. Here is what was said. You defile your sanctuaries by the multitude of your iniquities, by the iniquity of your trading. Therefore, I brought fire from your midst, it devoured you, and I turned you to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all who saw you. I brought fire from your midst, fire that will consume you. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And so, we understand that it is God who has put in the heart of the beast and the kings to run his own purpose. This is what we see in verse 17 that I propose you to consider with me. For God has put it into their hearts to fulfill His purpose, to be of one mind, to give their kingdom to the beast, until the words of God are fulfilled. God has made threats against Babylon. His people had already said, "She is fallen, Babylon the Great." And in chapter 18, the message is extended. And we can understand that God's purpose is to ensure that all systems that promise man mountains and wonders and promise happiness, in reality, all these systems will collapse. There is none able to handle man. And before Jesus returns, all systems will collapse one after another. I want to say that the last, Babylon, who seems the most elaborate, the most extraordinary, it will itself fall under the blows of a system that already existed and has already demonstrated its malignity. That's what the purpose of God is. So God's words are fulfilled. Yes, this is the second message. It is the Revelation 18th message. These are the words of Daniel chapter 9 verse 27 about the end of the devastating and many other messages. Now, it remains to see the last verse. And the woman whom you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. But she usurped the royalty over the kings of the earth. It is Jesus who holds it. So, let us not be fooled. Let us not delude ourselves. The King of Kings, the true King, the only one able to bring happiness and peace to man is Jesus.